Action.
Hi, this is Bob Leonetti, and I'm here at my Financial Mastery Workshop in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, I promised all of my students today, we asked them actually a big, huge question, which was, how many of you would like to learn how to speak or do some public speaking? And a lot of hands went up. And of course, my partner, Roland, who's moving the camera up and down over there, volunteered that I would put together several tips. In fact, we're going to do 15 separate tips on how to speak in public. And of course, everybody said, oh my goodness, let's go ahead and do that. So I promised that I would film that at lunch today during day 2 of my workshop. So here we are. In fact, you can see the room. We're sitting here in Vegas. Roland's going to pan around there. And you'll see that we are doing what we said we are going to do. Now, having said that, the first thing that you're going to want to remember is that you are responsible for introducing yourself. I don't care if somebody else introduces you or if you introduce yourself. You need to come up with some sort of a short biographical introduction that you can hand to somebody else and have them introduce you. Now, here's my suggestions on that. First of all, you don't want to mention your name until right before you come up. The introduction has to include other things about you, and it might be things about when they first met you or when they first came in contact with you. An introduction is best if done as a story. You know, the very first time I met this gentleman who's about to come up, he said, da, 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 da. So have them tell a little personal story about you. And then after you finish the personal story, the next thing is to have them list your accomplishments. So I might say about Roland, you know, the very, very first time I met him, Roland was a student of mine, and we hit it off really well personally. In fact, one of the cool things I remember about Roland was we went to a blah, 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 blah. So a nice little insightful story. And then, if I were to go on with Roland, I'd say, you know, but the reason that he's here today is because of the many accomplishments that he's done and his willingness to share them with you. And then I would go on and talk about Roland's accomplishments, whether he's written books, whether he has recorded videos, whether he's spoken to thousands of people. Maybe he's an expert on short sales. Maybe he's an expert on real estate. Whatever it is, you want to list the expertise, which will either give yourself credibility or have the other speaker give you credibility. When that's complete, then the speaker is going to say, so if you would, please put your hands together and welcome to the front of the room, and then they're going to list your name. So if I were introducing, let's say I'm going to introduce my partner, Jamie. Let me go ahead and give you just an example of an introduction. You know, when I first met this lady, I was really impressed because, well, let me rephrase that. When I first, see, by the way, you got to practice this stuff too. This is totally off the cuff. You know, the next lady you're about to meet that's coming up this afternoon is very quite special. Let me tell you just a little bit about her. When I very first met Jamie, it was back in 1992, and she was working for the same company that I was working for. Now, that wasn't the impressive part. The impressive part was that she had been a speaker for another company in Florida, and I found out that she was the only person in that entire company who actually had done what she was teaching. Well, that was pretty impressive, but then I started working with her and realized here is a lady who is an expert at what she does. Over the last 15 years, she started a business out of her house, which she took public in 6 months, or 6 years. Quit doing the thing on me, we have to start this all over anyway. Tip number 2 in public speaking is don't take yourself too seriously. The bottom line is if you make a mistake, and you will make a mistake, don't back up and go, oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. Just move on. People love you. They're there because you have the right to be here. You've got the right to speak to them, and you need to think about them, not you. Now, tip number 3 is how you approach the stage after you've been introduced. Roland's going to follow me with the camera. Come on back. It's like the whole Blair Witch video thing. Come back to the back of the room. Here's what I do when I get ready to go on stage. First thing that I do is while the speaker is introducing me, I'm at the back of the room, I'm in the center of the room, I'm in the back of the room, and I'm thinking, what am I going to say, how am I going to do this? And I'm building up the energy. So it's a very introspective moment. I don't allow people to talk to me at this time because I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next. As the speaker introduces me, depending on the amount of energy, the speaker will jump up, or maybe the whole crowd will jump up, and they'll say, please welcome to the stage, all the way from Austin, Texas, Mr. Bob Leonetti. Hopefully they'll clap for you, and if they don't, well, that's too bad anyway. Now, the key here is how you walk to the front of the room. Now, you could do just a casual stroll like this, and you know what? That doesn't work. It works for the big gurus who've already established a huge reputation. You, on the other hand, if you've not met your crowd or you're not well known and you're building a reputation, you want to have lots of energy. Why? Because the energy that you give the room will give back to you, and it works off of each other. So here's what I would do. I'm going to step back here. Roland's going to be way down there. You'll probably hear me. And Roland will say, all the way, go ahead, Roland, you can say it.
All the way from Austin, Texas, it's Bob Leonetti. Come on down.
You walk at a brisk pace like this at about this space, and you come up to the front of the room, and you turn around, and you either acknowledge them, say, thank you very much, I really appreciate it, if you would, please have a seat. And you're right here in the middle where you can see everybody, but that pace that you walked up was brisk. The next thing you're going to have to remember is how to overcome your fear of public speaking. There's a joke that's told by speakers and everybody pretty much that says, and this is true, the fear of speaking in public ranks higher on the national fear scale than the fear of death. And of course, the rest of that joke is most people would rather be lying in the coffin than giving the eulogy. Now, these jokes aren't going to get any better, but the bottom line is if people are scared, if you are scared when you're speaking, it's for one reason and one reason only, and that is because you're thinking about yourself, not your audience. Remember, you have a right to be there. They would not have asked you to come and speak if you hadn't already earned the right to be in front of them. So when you get up in front of people, the idea is not for you to think about you. Gosh, is my zipper zipped? Are they worried about what I'm going to say? Is my hair done right? That's not it, because if you think about you, what's going to happen? Two things. Number one, the audience will be keying in on that, and number two, you're going to be scared to death because your energies are focused inward rather than outward. If you want to be an effective public speaker, focus your energies outward and give to others like you would in a conversation. The next thing you're going to think about public speaking is the opening. When you get to the front of the room, what's your main objective? Here is your main objective. Your objective is to get the group immediately engaged with you, and your job is to take a bunch of individuals and turn them into one specific unit. Now, one of the mistakes that I see people make constantly who are novice public speakers is that they apologize for things as soon as they get up. And why? Two reasons. Again, they're thinking about themselves. You don't want to think about themselves. And what it does is it detracts from what goes on in the audience. So for instance, if I come to the front of the room and the first things out of my mouth was, folks, I'm sorry I'm a little bit late today, or, I really haven't prepared for this, so I appreciate any kind of thing that you guys will do and leeway you'll give me, what you're doing is you're taking away from your validity. The people have no idea what time you were really supposed to start. They have no idea what you're supposed to wear. They have no idea what your speech is supposed to cover, and nor should you let that on. You should come up with an attitude of confidence, and whatever you do, do not apologize. Now, when it comes to controlling the crowd, there's some things that you need to be aware of. Number one is you want to have what's called a rave opening. And I use an acronym, RAVE, R-A-V-E, which stands for, and you might want to write this down, riveting opening is the R. The A stands for appropriate content. We'll get into each one of these. The V is varied forms of presentation, and the E is for electric closing. Notice I don't say ending, I say closing, because when you start a speech or you start a talk, you're starting something with the end in mind. What do you want them to do when you finish? You have to think about all of this ahead of time. So let's go back to the first 5 minutes that you're in front of a crowd. He's making me move around here. The first 5 minutes you're in front of a crowd, you want to A, capture their attention, and B, take an entire room of individuals and turn them into one unit. I'll show you how to do that in just a minute.
And action.
Hey, let's talk about a riveting opening, which is the R in our acronym of RAVE. A lot of speakers will come up and they will introduce themselves, and it's the same old stuff you hear. Hi, my name is Bob Leonetti, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about the real estate market. Ugh. Nobody wants to hear that. If you want to grab your audience's attention, come up with something brand new. Come up with something that involves them. For instance, one of the better speakers I've seen recently, she stood up in front of the group, and the first words out of her mouth, she didn't introduce herself, she didn't do anything. The first words out of her mouth were, imagine a place where there is no such thing as advertising, where there are no billboards, where there are no radio ads, there's no television ads, and all the information that you'd like to hear you can't find anywhere. Now, what that does is that immediately engages the listener. By the way, she was from the Soviet Union, and because of that, she was telling a true story. See, you want to tell a story, but you want to get your people immediately involved. There have been times that my partner, Jamie, when she opens a workshop, she might come up to the front of the room after she's been introduced, and rather than say, "Hi, my name is Jamie Kayla, I'm here to talk to you about the mortgage market," or whatever, she might walk over to someone sitting in the front row and say, "Hi, my name's Betty Byer," and she immediately goes into this little role play. What does that do? It engages people, and it shows them that you're different. Imagine if there's two of you speaking at a meeting, and the person in front of you stands up and says, "Hi, my name's Bob, we're here to talk about the mortgage market today, and by the way, we're different than everybody else," versus you walking up and say, "Hi, my name's Betty Byer, and let me ask you a question. One's engaging, one is the same old stuff. So whatever you do, make sure that your opening is one that grabs their attention and is riveting." The second thing that you want to do as part of your opening is your job as a speaker, and this is very important that you get this, is in the first 3 to 5 minutes, take a group of individuals and make them one solid unit. I'm going to say that again, I think it's very important. Take a group of individuals and make them one solid unit. So if I'm speaking to a group and I know that they're maybe a little bit hesitant about seeing me, I have to do something that gets them all to act so that if I go this way, they all go this way. And here's one of the things that I've done. I'll give you a little example. When I first started speaking, I was speaking at a real estate investment club up in Buffalo, New York, and I had traveled all day to get there. And the speaker introduced me, and here he is. He's spoken all over the country, all over Canada, blah, 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 Bob Leonetti. So I walked to the front of the room, and there's like a couple of people going, and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a tough crowd. And what made it worse, it was very low ceilings. It was an old VFW hall, and there were big, huge round tables, and half the people in the room had their back to me. So I realized that I had to do something that A, got them engaged with me, and B, got them acting together as a unit. And so the first thing I did was I got up the front of the room, as I said, "Everybody please stand up." Now, if the people don't stand up, you can't take no for an answer. You have to walk over and maybe you joke, maybe you do this, but you have to command them and say, "Okay, no, this is the exercise portion of the class, please stand up." The worst thing you can do is give a command and not have it followed. So if 10 people out of 15 follow it, you've got to get the other 5 engaged. "Oh, I'm sorry, is there something wrong with your legs? Stand up." Or tease them or get the people in the crowd with you to get the people to stand up. Now, once the whole room is standing and they all stood up separately because they're a bunch of individuals, ask them a few questions. Maybe get them to interact, which lowers their defenses. And now they're more receptive to you. So get them to interact, and you might just ask them a very simple question on interaction. You might say, "What are 2 things you expect to get out of this evening? If you would please turn to your partner or introduce yourself to the person next to you and tell them 2 things you'd like to get out of tonight." Now, what that does is it sets up expectations on their part, and they realize that other people sitting in the room have the same expectations they do. But what it also does is when they all finish, then you can say to the entire room, "If you're ready to have a fantastic night, spend the next 90 minutes changing your life, please sit down." When they all sit down at the same time, now you know you've got a room.
Action.
Hey, the A in our acronym of RAVE stands for appropriate content. You may speak on a certain subject, but you have to alter your presentation a little bit to match the needs of your customers. Let me give you an example. Not too long ago, I did a presentation having to do with finding mortgage notes and defaulted paper, etc. The person, the promoter, whose database, if you would, that I was speaking to her customers. She specializes in bankruptcy. And so one of the things I did was I mentioned bankruptcy in my presentation. I would also suggest, if you're doing a presentation to a specific group, that you do some homework and learn a little bit about that group. Not too long ago, I did a presentation for a gentleman by the name of Bill Barnett. Bill has a brand new book out. So I went and bought the book, knowing I was going to do this presentation. And that afternoon, I thumbed through the book and I looked at the chapter titles and said some things. What that allowed me to do is when I was on the phone call with his customers that night, with all of his students, I was able to refer to his book and actually use some of the things that he was using. That will not only endear you to the promoter, but it will also give you something in common with the promoter's customers. As part of appropriate content, one of the things that will make you effective as a speaker is to tell your audience what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. If you're doing an entire event, you should do this with each piece that you do. If you're doing a 15 or 20-minute presentation, you should always, again, come back to the beginning throughout your content. So, for instance, I might say, ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight, and tonight you're going to learn the following 3 things. And I would always go to the numbers rather than be vague. People like numbers, so don't tell them you're going to learn this, 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 and this. Tell them you're going to learn the following 3 items or the following 4 items. And we're going to show you 9 ways how to do this, and 7 ways how to do this, and 15 ways to do this, etc. Tell them where you're going. And you can also, if you want, tell them what it is not going to be, and then tell them what it is going to be. Tonight's presentation is not going to be a 20-minute infomercial on why you should do business with me. What it is going to do is tell you how to save your house in a down market if you're behind on your mortgage or whatever. So tell them what it is, what it isn't, tell them what it is, tell them what they're going to learn, then tell them, you actually teach them, and at the end say, tonight you have learned this, 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 and this. The V stands for varied methods of presentation. Now, when I get in front of a room, I know that obviously people are keying in on me as a speaker, but without my visuals, it's really difficult for me to do things. Why? And you need to remember this. People learn either by listening, or by watching, or by doing. Now, they're going to learn a lot more by doing and getting physically involved than they are by just listening. You always want to make sure that you're using at least 2 of those at any time. So if you want to get them involved, you might be speaking to them, or they might be hearing something. If you're showing them something, or you're talking to them where they're hearing, you want to show stuff up on the screens as well, or maybe on an overhead right in front of you. Remember, there's a screen. Remember that people are going to get involved with your speech on 3 different levels. They're going to get involved with you mentally. You have to key into what their expectations are. So if they came to hear you talk about the short sale market, obviously you got to talk about short sales. They're going to key in mentally. They're also going to key in on you, and you're going to be far more effective if you hit them on 2 other levels. One is emotion and one is physically. When you're talking emotions, especially if you're doing sales, get them involved emotionally. One of the things that you can do is say something like, if this is true for you, imagine, if you would, how it feels to receive a check for $273,000 at closing that you know is all yours, and then imagine how much better it feels when you go home and you pick up the phone and you call that first credit card company and you say, tell me what the payoff is. See, now what I've done is I've hit them on an emotional level, and people buy emotionally. But people also need to be involved with you physically. And the way to get them involved physically is to have them write things down. And so your varied content might include a piece of paper on your handout where they either fill in the blanks based on what you're teaching, or they check off a true and false, or maybe it's just lines where they have to type, or they have to write in what you're doing. By them getting physically involved, or maybe it's an interaction between each other, you're negotiating and people are talking to each other, they're getting physically involved. So remember, get people involved, do an varied form of presentation, and get them involved mentally, emotionally, and physically. Finally, in getting rave reviews, your ending has to be electric. It has to be something that grabs their attention, and most importantly, it needs to be a call to action. Now, one of the things that I like to do to make endings exciting is I like to tie them into something earlier in my presentation. For instance, it used to be when I was doing presentations for real estate agents, I would start out and I'd say, if you would, everybody please close your eyes. Now what I'm doing here is, again, I'm taking the whole room and giving them direction. You have to be used to giving the room direction. If you're not willing to give them direction, they're not going to follow you. So I will tell them, I don't ask them, please close your eyes, everybody. No. Everybody, if you would, please close your eyes. And then you wait for everybody to close your eyes. Now sit back, take a deep breath, and again, you're giving them directions, getting them to follow you, and say, now I want you to do this. I want you to imagine with me, if you would, that you're standing out on a balcony, you're on the deck of a ship somewhere in the South Seas, and you realize as you're standing there, maybe with your loved one in your arms and a nice glass of wine if you drink, watching the sunset, that the reason you're here tonight, or that day, the reason you're there is because you've started to work smarter, not harder in your business. Everybody please open your eyes. Now what that does is several things. It gets them emotionally involved up front, and then I get them to all do the same action at the same time and key back in on me. Again, I've taken a bunch of individuals and made them act as a group. Now when I get to the ending, I always want to tie my ending in with my beginning. So I might say toward the end of that particular little speech, so folks, the next time you're out on that ship, or when you're out on that ship, you want to paint this picture. When you're out on that ship with your arm around your loved one, watching that sunset, remember that today you learned how to work smarter, not harder. That's a good ending. The other thing that I want to say about endings is that you have to, if you're doing any kind of sales presentation where you want them to take a specific action, you need to start your presentation with the end in mind. So when you sit down to write your presentation, you need to be asking yourself, what is the purpose of this presentation? I'll tell you that in the next video.
Next.
I said in the last video, I want you to begin with the end in mind. So you need to sit down when you're writing your presentation and be able to sum up your entire presentation in one sentence. What do you want the outcome to be? And build your presentation around that. So you might say in one sentence, I want my outcome to be, I want more people to come to me for help with their real estate problems. That's great. Then pick 2 or 3 points to get them to come to you and build your presentation. So now you've got an introduction, you've got 2 or 3 points, and you've got a close. Those points might be something along the lines of, first thing we want people to know is that they have options. The second thing is I'm going to tell them what some of those options are. The third thing is I'm going to tell them what the benefits of exercising those options are. You always want to state the benefits and build a picture in the mind's eye. And then when you get to the ending, you get to the closing, you want to recap where you've been and always ask for the business. So you might say, you know what, folks? We've had a great time here this evening, but the bottom line is I really want to help people, and that's why I do what I do. So if you know of anybody who's behind in their payments on their house, or is having problems making their payments, or who's been affected by this huge mortgage mess, what I'd like to do is have them give them a call. I've got cards, I've got flyers in the back, and by the way, I will be around to talk with you after the workshop this evening to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much, or whatever. It's a soft close, but you're getting people out there. Now, one final tip on this, if you're making a presentation that's a timed presentation, and the agent might say, like the real estate agents, and the agent might say, the broker might say, you know what, you only have 16 minutes to do this, or whatever the number is. When you get toward the end of your presentation, you always have to stay on time. What you might say is something like, you know what, your brokers asked me to keep this and limit this today to 15 minutes. I know a lot of you have questions. I will be around in the back of the room. Thank you very much. Acknowledge the broker, tell them thank you, and let everybody know that your presentation really isn't over, but you'll continue it at the back of the room outside of the general meeting. You know, when you're making a presentation and you're creating one, the thing that you have to do is practice it. Now, I am notorious for not practicing. In fact, the joke that I keep with everybody is, you and I have no idea what I'm going to say today, and everybody laughs, ha ha ha. And the reality is, I have a lot of ideas what I'm going to say. In a presentation, however, I don't care if you're an off-the-cuff speaker, you need to have gone through your presentation at least 4 to 5 times by yourself before you give it in public. Why? So that you know what the next thing is that's coming. For instance, let's say that you do a PowerPoint presentation. If you don't know what the next slide is, you might get off track when leading into the slide. So you want to, rather than click the slide and then talk, and then as you're talking, click the slide so that you know where your presentation's going. You have to rehearse it. And even if you don't like to rehearse the content part in the middle, whatever you do, rehearse your beginning and your ending. And you have to do that. And the best speakers that I know, the beginning and the end are scripted. So they might do a lot of content in the middle that's not scripted, kind of off the cuff, they're following an outline. But when it gets to the beginning or the end of your speech, you need to have it scripted to know exactly what you're going to say. That does a couple things for you. If you get nervous, you can rely back on your message. And number 2, you always remember to say the right things. So write your presentation out, and even if you don't write out the middle, certainly write out word for word your beginning and your ending.
Go.
There's a couple things that speakers need to be aware of. This little tidbit that I'll give you right now has to do with physical preparation, if you would. If you have overhead slides, the worst thing that can happen is you fill out all your overhead acetates, you make them at home, you put them on a printer, you get to the actual event, and the speaker doesn't have an overhead projector. Or you put together this huge PowerPoint presentation, you bring your little zip drive, and you get there, and they don't have a computer, or they don't have a projector to project on the screen. Or worse, you plug it into their computer, but they don't have PowerPoint on their computer. So you need to think these things through and always plan for the worst while expecting the best. I'm not saying expect the worst, I'm saying plan for it. If you're using a little flip camera like we're using today, one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that you've got batteries, backup batteries on hand, so that you don't run out of film like this one's about to do. You want to make sure that if you are speaking and you're going to go out to dinner first, you might take an extra shirt in the car. Why? Because you might spill something on your shirt at dinner. And that brings up the final point, which is this. Above all things, just be yourself. There's no reason for you to worry about what people think of you. You're human just like everybody else. If you get a spot on your shirt at dinner, and if it comes up, great. Otherwise, just ignore it. People are not there to look at the spot on your shirt. They're there to look at who you are. Don't memorize things that are not your words. Don't try to take my words and deliver them. Deliver your words. Be yourself. People love you for who you are.
Go.
All right. I even said it was a final thought, but it's not. This is the final thought, and that's this. You know what? You have to have some fun. In fact, I lay out rules for my workshop. I teach a 4-day workshop, and one of the rules I have is have fun. If your people are laughing, A, they're enjoying you, B, they're learning a whole lot more, and C, they'll remember you better. And if they're laughing with you or even at you, and it's okay to be self-deprecating, it's fine, because you want people to laugh and you want them to enjoy themselves, you want them to enjoy hanging out with you. Poke fun at yourself, it's okay. Or if you got a stupid little joke, you can tell the stupid little joke, provided that if it's not a laugh, that you can acknowledge that it's a stupid joke, like who wrote this stuff anyway, type thing. Have a great time, and above all things, just be yourself. I can't emphasize that enough. We get people that come up all the time. Hi, my name is so-and-so, and they're trying to be something that they're not. The reality is, if you're sitting in the audience watching a speaker, what you really key in on is that person's personality, not with the big wall that they're putting up trying to give out, but the person's personality. Also, dress appropriately, which goes along with everything else I've been talking about, the having fun bit. Yeah, thanks, buddy. I'm dressed appropriately only because people know that I'm a pretty casual guy. When I first spoke to this group, I was wearing a suit. Okay, sometimes jackets give you more credibility. On the other hand, if you've spoken to a group several times and they know that you never wear jackets in public, like I never wear jackets anymore after selling the bank, then what happens is I speak in a Hawaiian shirt and a pair of black pants. People know that that's kind of like my uniform. They're okay with that. They've keyed in on it. So if you've heard that you have to speak in a blue suit, white shirt, and red tie if you're a guy, or business dress if you're a woman, yes, if you're trying to establish some credibility, and no, if you really want the people to know who you are.